Okay. So considering like some of you are new to Angular, but almost like everyone knows the basic, like what is Angular, what are the component directive pipes, at least overview you everyone has, right? So if not now, after some days also we are going to see this, but anyway, I was going to take this topic to the interview preparation group. So I wanted to explain this same to everyone. Okay. Whatever you can understand, just have a look. I know you might be having so many questions, but at least just see how do you set up a project. Okay. So what we are going to do, whenever we start a project, let's say you are working on a particular company and you got a project, a new project is there that is from very scratch, right? So your TL or your architect will set up the project for you. Means they will create the project, they will create the folder structure, where to keep pipe, where to keep directives, where to create your constant, where to keep your API call, where to keep your API call method, right? How to create helper function. So many things are there. So he might create you the folder structure. Or in small company, even if though in small companies not guaranteed that everyone will have an architect or team lead. If you are a senior person, senior developer also, let's say with 5 to 6 years of experience, you only have to set up this project, right? So what thing we normally take care when we set up the project, so that we are going to cover now. Those who are from .NET or Java, they know like in .NET or Java, there are so many different types of architecture we can implement, right? So many shared library services, one big project inside that, again, smaller applications we can have. Again, same kind of thing we can do in Angular also by using micro frontend. But again, micro frontend we cannot use in every project. If a project is very vast, so many different teams are going to work, so many small application are there, then only we can go for a micro front end. But not every project is that much big, right? So for implementing micro front end, you need the project also kind of a that big, so that you can create small project, and for every project you have a different team also working parallelly. Then only you can go for a micro front end, right? But let's say if we talk about 60% projects are normal only, or even we can go 70 also, only 30% projects are there where we need micro front end setup. Okay. So apart from that, let's say 70 projects, whatever we have, there we go with this folder structure. So where we have a single project, and in a single project inside a single project only, we manage everything. Okay. So this is just overview like what thing we have. Okay, consider like you don't have a lazy loading application. Again, in lazy loading also same kind of behavior will follow, but we will just consider the normal project without lazy loading. Okay. Now, so what building blocks of Angular we have? So in Angular we have component, pipes, directives, services, module, right? These are the building blocks of our Angular application. So when we talk about how do we set up our Angular application, it is just a folder structure, and how you categorize or manipulate your code. Where do you keep your which file, related file into particular folder, like that. Okay. So whenever you set up a project for your actual project, first thing like API calls for an environment related. Let's say your project started, and that project, when you start working, you deploy to QA environment, dev environment. Once QA verified, then we deploy to UAT, then it goes to production. Multiple environments are there. So up to Angular 15 now, we used to get environment folder by default created. But after Angular 16, they disabled it. It is not coming by default. So first we create that environment folder. So environment folder is like that. Environment related some constant information, we keep it over there. Means let's say you have three environment, dev. So for dev, API might be something else. Let's say dev.api.com. When you deploy to QA, for QA you will have different database, because every environment will have different database. So that different API endpoint will also there. For production, again UAT, somewhere we have stage, according to the different companies follow they. Somewhere we have UAT, somewhere we have stage, somewhere we have UAT1, UAT2, stage 1, stage 2. So many different environments are there. Okay. So these are nothing but different environment. So according to the different environment, we might have different APIs. Let's say you are using file server, and from file server you get some, for every environment you have some unique, what do we say, that something identifier we have now, that we have to pass, then only we can load our images from file server. So for every environment you have something different. So environment related things we can keep it over there. So when you create the build, according to the environment you create the build, and that environment file it will consider. Okay. So first we will create the environment folder. In Angular 15, it was by default. Now we have to explicitly create it. So just a normal project I have created with Angular 20. Angular 20, 19, 18, 16, same things will follow. Okay. Just here standalone components are there. So ng generate environments. Spelling is correct. Environments. Okay. Enter. So see what it has done. It has created two files, environment.ts and environment.development.ts, and it has updated angular.json. So when you create the environment folder, the link of this file will be in your angular.json. Just to replace with what? See, replace with this. Okay. So development environment.development.ts, this will be for your local. Let's say when you actually work, when you start working on the task, you will be using the dev API. So let's say here you keep your API URL. So it's a constant. So everything should be in capital. API URL. Let's say your dev environment is dev.api.com. Just an example I'm taking, okay? Dev.api.com. Then same key name will be present over here also. But here, let's say prod.api.com. So for production, let's say this is your API URL. For development, this is your API URL. So property name will be same, but the values will be different. So when you run, this file will be considered. When you create the build, this file will be considered. So that's why property name is same, because this property name, you are going to use it into services whenever you have to make the API call. So let's say, oh, up till over here, API slash, up till over here, you will keep it over here. Then your controller name and the method name you will append in your service file that we will see. So first we have created environment folder. Okay. Now in app folder, we create our code will be in the app folder, right? So by default, we get this app component. This is Angular 20. So you don't see that app.component, that naming convention got changed. Now over here, we have to first create the basic folder structure. So I will create a core folder. Okay. Then shared folder. Then let's say pages. Okay. These are the three top folders we have. Now, core should contain the things which are not directly connected with your UI. Core folder should contain all the things which are not directly connected with your UI. It is just a code level, something is there. So in core, again, what we can have? Let's say services we can have. Services doesn't have any relation directly with the UI, right? Then constant folder, then model folder. Now model means like class or interface we create, right? Again, in the model folder, we can have class, classes, or interfaces. Again, just to categorize again. Okay, so all the classes, export class, what we create, you will create over here, and all the interfaces you will create over here. Okay, then services. Then we need enum also. So again, like those who have already worked on a project where we have some enums kind of requirement, those they may know, because enum, like it needs proper scenario there only. Let's say you are working on application and there, let's say employee record is there, and in employee you have three status, let's say active, deactive, pending, something like that. So instead of hard coding that value, you create a enum.active, enum dot something like that. Okay, so we create multiple enums also. So enum folder. Then we create a helper file. Okay, I will come to this helper, when and why we need to use this. So in core folder, we have constant, enum, helper file, model file. In model, again, we will have class and interface and services. Okay, did we miss anything? Yeah, covered everything. Okay, after that, we have shared. Now in shared, we keep things which are a little bit connected with your UI, your directives, pipes, reusable component. Okay, so over here, we will create folder like directives, means custom directive. Okay, not the one we already have. Directives, then pipes, and your reusable component. Okay. So in shared, we have created three folder: directives, pipes, and reusable component. Okay. Again, so if there won't be a single proper project where we don't have reusable component, or where we don't have any custom directive, or where we don't have any custom pipe. All the proper enterprise level application will have all these three things. Okay. So this will be in your shared folder. After that, in pages folder, you will create the component which are actually not reusable and which we are going to access with the route. Okay. So here, let's say if we consider this is going to be, let's say, employee management application. Okay. So in here again in pages, when we talk about employee management application, there might be modules also. Let's say employee folder is there. In employee folder, or one more module I will create, master. Okay. So let's say in employee, we have multiple component. I'm creating component. Okay. Ng generate component. I'm going a little bit fast because so many things are there. So let's say employee list component, all the related component of employee you will create inside the employee folder. Let's say new employee. Like that, all components which are related to the employee module, you will create over inside this folder. Just another folder we are creating just to group the things. Then let's say master. So over here, ng generate component, let's say department master. Then let's say designation is there. Like that, all master kind of data component you will create over here. Let's say again, bank providers, something. Got it? So like this, you will create components over here. So in core folder, we will have constant, enum, helper files, model. And again, in model, we can have either class or interface and services. In pages, you will actually create the component which are for which you are going to access those components by the routes. Okay. Then shared folder. In shared folder, you will have directive, pipes, reusable component. Again, here multiple component will be there. Let's say, just for example, I'm creating. Okay. Let's say you have a reusable table. So ng generate component, my table, just to name, or grid table. So here you have your reusable table, alert box, right? Wherever we show, wherever we have to show warning or a success message. So we use alert box. So that, so all the reusable component will be over here. Let's say if we talk about pipe, let's say uh, just a normal NA pipe, wherever we have to show either a record is undefined, null or empty. So we show hyphen hyphen, right? So let's say I have to create that simplest pipe. That is NA pipe, ng generate pipe NA. Pipe I have created. Like that, multiple pipes again I will create over here. Then directive. Let's say in your project, you are not using any third-party library to show the tooltip and you have to create your own tooltip directive. So you can create it over here. Ng generate, what is it? Directive tooltip. Then you have to create a directive which will only allow text or only allow number, right? So let's say create a directive which will only allow number only. And this directive, you will add it on any input element, either even though it is input type text. And if you add this directive, it will only allow to number only. There are some requirement that we don't have to go for input type number. It should be input type text, but we should allow only number to be entered. So we have to create directive in that case, right? Again, so many use cases are there of various use cases are there. Likewise, you will create the directives. Okay. So directives, pipes, and the reusable component. These are there. Now, when it comes to services, now in constant, first I will create the constant, or first let's create the service. Let's say we started working on the employee component. Okay. Let's say someone got the employee task and we started working on it. API is also ready. Okay. So let's say in services, again, just I will create a folder structure because in employee model also I might create multiple services. So instead of keeping all the services into your service folder, again, you create the folder structure. Fine. Employee Then again, I will create one more folder, master, so that we can see properly. Fine. Now let's say in employee component, we have to create our service. So open a new terminal, ng generate service employee. Now remember in Angular 20, basically this is case. Now we don't have employee component over here, but let's say if we have created employee component, so that class name will be employee.ts. And if you create the service also with just this employee, that class will be also with the same name. Now you have two classes with the same name. One is service and one is component. Okay. So if you are using it somewhere, so somewhere, because we use that IntelliSense a lot. Now you have two classes with the same name. So somewhere it might suggest you that employee component, and somewhere it may suggest you service also. So because the naming convention got changed, now we should not have two classes with the same name. So now while creating services, you should add the ending prefix or something like that. So service. Previously, don't used to do this, right? But now you have to start doing this because naming convention is like that. Okay. Otherwise, we will have two classes with the same name. So employee service is there. Okay. Now, why we are getting error? Oh my God. I didn't add that. I didn't install the node module. Let me quickly cmd. Just let me bind that. cd Angular 20 cd project setup node. Okay. So in employee service, now in employee service, let's say you have to do the API call. Let's check any API call, project API, freeapi.com. So let's say out of this, we will consider like this employee app. Fine. Now in employee app, you have get all employee API. Okay. If I click on test endpoint, this is my URL. Now this is my URL. So this up to in my API URL, this is constant up till API. So this I will keep into my environment folder because API, the actual API endpoint is going to be common. Your controller name and method name is going to change. So my API URL I will keep into my environment folder. Okay. Now I don't have the production. So both the file I'm keeping the same. Fine. Up to API, we have kept it over here with the slash also. So common API URL we have stored into our environment.file. After that, in your employee service, let's say you have to write a get API call component. So get all employee. Now here we do the API call. So return, again, we need to inject our HTTP. So private HTTP colon HTTP client, return this dot HTTP dot get, then your URL. Okay. Now your URL up till API, you have kept it into your environment.ts. So here, first you will get that URL dot API URL. Then you have the remaining URL. So up till API, you have stored that into your, what do we say? Environment file. Then remaining your controller name and the action name. It will be over here. So when you actually call this method URL plus this, so then you will come, then your complete URL will get formed. Now this employee service, you are going to inject into your employee list component. So employee list, let's say implement on init, employee service, inject employee service. Fine. Since we have implemented on init, so we can go with ng on init and then get employee. And over here, this dot employee service, currently we just have one function and we can subscribe to it. Normal subscribe API call we have done. And this function, we will call it over here. Okay. Now So when your component load, you are going to call this function. Ultimately, it will call the function from your service. So it will come over here. Okay. Now, after get employee, let's say you have to create new employee also. So create new employee function. Here, it might be your post API. So again, return. So this function you are going to call from your, guys, don't wait for the question. Wait for question. Okay. What I was telling. Yeah, post API. So this function, let's say from component on click of save button, you are going to call API to create the employee. So while calling, you are going to get the object. So object colon any. So this dot HTTP dot post API. Post API needs two parameter URL and the object. So environment dot API URL plus. So let's say post API. What's the post API? Create employee. Okay. So employee app slash create employee. This is your controller name and the actual method name. And then you will pass the method name over here. Okay. Now see properly. Now I will explain class and interface also in between now. So in employee list component, we are going to make the API call. So whatever the data you get that you will store, that you have to store it into some variable. So let's say employee list any. I'm going with any. Okay. Then I will explain why we should not go with any. And here this dot employee list is equal to res, considering we are going to get the response directly. Okay. Now let's say you want to iterate the data in your ng for somewhere in the table or in the card. So what you do, you will at the rate for loop. It's not coming. Something is wrong. Do we have any error? No. Why something is wrong? Employee list. Anyone getting what I'm doing wrong? Why it's not showing? Yeah, track I wrong. But this is not getting highlighted. Why it's not highlighting? In problem, we don't have anything. Let's try to run it. Still this curly bracket get highlighted, no? Or no? Yeah, perfect now. Okay. So here, let's say you have li, and when you try to access the emp dot, you don't get any suggestion because the data type which we have given to employee list is any, right? So now instead of going with any, now let's check the data. Get all employee test endpoint. So this kind of a data I'm going to get. So for this API, this is the response you are going to get, array of this object. So what you do, either you create class or interface. Okay. So let's first create the interface. So in interface folder, what you create, just a normal file. So let's say employee dot interface dot ts. Simple TypeScript file I have created. Now here export interface employee list. Okay. And what are the things I have that I will have it over here? One or two properties I will create. So employee ID, this is my property, data type will be number. Then full name, colon data type will be string. So like that, all the properties you will create. Okay. Now, here, instead of any, you can give the proper data type employee list. Now see, here also we created employee list and our component class name is also same. So now it is pointing to this. So that's what I said, because that component naming convention got removed. So there are so many times it will happen that same name will be there, right? Now this employee list is pointing to this class, but it should point to this, right? So it is an interface. So we will start with I. Okay, that will denote. I also forgot that I employee list. Now it will suggest the import from the interface. Okay. Now we have provided the proper data type. Now if you go to the HTML and when you write dot, why it's not coming? HTML seems not working properly. Wait. It is saying this file is not saved or what? Import has been automatically added. Core model interface. Yes. Why it's giving error? Yep, compile now. Still it is not showing properties. Let me recompile one more time. Might be possible. Or we have to close and open again. Sometimes happen. See, still it's not suggesting. Let me close and open again. Close folder, Control R, project setup. Just give it a minute. GS. With this extension is activating. Why this is cannot parse expression? Now it's suggesting. Off now. We don't have to declare. See the habit of copy pasting. We don't need to create the instance. Okay. Now if I go with employee dot, still item, sorry. See, we are getting the suggestion because we properly data type what type of data I'm going to get in this array, right? So this is instead of going with any the spelling mistake or strongly typing. So that's the purpose of creating class or interface. Okay. Now, as a rule, we say ki we should not use any, but some are the scenarios where we have to use any. Okay. Now, here in employee list, our actual service, we will go to our service now. Now here also, this function is returning observable, right? So we have to properly provide the data type also. So what type of observable data you are providing, right? So observable array of this your I employee list only. Okay. And when you provide the proper data type after get also, you need to provide the return type. I employee same. Okay. Now this function is returning observable type of this array. Okay. So same you are able to receive it. But let's say in your service, if you don't add this array symbol, considering like you are returning a single instance of employee model, here it will, why we are not getting error, but okay, sorry, here we give any. Now I employee, everywhere we have to provide the proper data type. I employee list. Okay. So now it will throw the error because this function is returning single instance of I employee. And here you said multiple, right? So this is how you can accidentally prevent unnecessary code also, because sometimes let's say in get API, get all employee also has the get and get by ID also has the get. So you need to create proper, what do we say, return type also. So properly strongly type data will be there. Okay. So that's the use of your creating class or interface. Okay. So in your model folder, In interface, you will create classes in classes. Again, according to the different module, you will keep on creating multiple interface file and multiple classes file. Okay. So this is about class and interface. Now, coming back to our service. So we have used interface, but still we have a rule like nothing should be hard code. Currently, if you see, this is hard code, right? We should not hard code anything anywhere. This should come from a constant file. Okay. Now coming back to our constant file. So we will create a constant file. Let's say in again constant file, you can have multiple constant file, global constant file, validation constant file. Again, we can have regular expression or labels also can come from a constant file, right? So we can have multiple constant file also according to our project need also again. Okay. Let's say your project is small, you don't have so many things. So single file, single constant is also enough. Okay. Global constant.ts. Now here export const, let's say global constant. Okay. This is your normal constant file. Now, let's say a single constant I'm going to use for storing API method or regular expression or some validation messages or something else can be there. So let's say first in constant, you need to store your API endpoints. So what I can do, API endpoint. Okay. Now here again, I will have an inner object. Now, again in API, we have module, employee module, master module, salary module, something department designation. So first controller employee. Now here you will have method get all employee. And here you will have your actual, what do we say? Method name. Okay. So again, for controller also, you can create one more. So let's say this is API endpoint method. API endpoint method. Okay. Where we will store our actual method name. Just like that, we will have API endpoint controller. Okay. Here we will just have our controller names. So let's say employee. Your API controller name is employee app. Okay. Then over here you will have the actual method name. So get employee will go over here. Just like employee, we will have department. Then department related all API actual endpoint method name, you can put it over here. Get department or something, whatever your actual method name is there. Department, let's say create new, add new department like that. Here in employee, again we have create new employee, right? So this is how you store the data. Now, how do we use this? So here in employee app, what you need? Your controller name. Okay. So after this, your global constant dot API controller dot employee. Okay. Then you don't need this. After that, you need the method name. So plus, and you need that slash also. So slash, you can either keep it over here or your in controller also you can keep it. So again, global constant dot API endpoint method dot employee dot get all employee. Okay, let me bring it down like this. Now it will actually complete your whole URL over here. So nothing is hard code. Everything is coming from your constant file. Getting it? Or you can do one thing like you can create a variable and you can store the global value over there. Constant any We should go to any, or let's try global constant. Okay, so here it won't come. It's equal to global constant. Now, instead of writing this whole line, constant dot, this dot constant dot, then API means you can just either every time you, instead of writing this, you can store the global constant over here and then you use it over here like this. Controller dot employee and icon. Okay. So nothing should be static. Everything should come from your constant. Now, what do we keep in constant? So your API endpoint method, then your validation messages. So validation messages. Now in validation messages, let's say in your HTML, let's say you have in every component almost you have the form. So this is required, min length is this, max length is this, email is required. Validation messages are common, right? And in every component it gets repeated. So instead of writing it again and again, we can keep that text over here so that if we have to change, currently let's say client said ki we need validation message for required, like this is required. But after some days he said ki like instead of this is required, we need this is mandatory. But if it is hard coded in every component, you have to manually go and change it. But if it is coming from your constant, so you change it over here, it will reflect everywhere, right? So required, and here this is required. Just like that, validation, all validation message will come over here. Regular expression we use, right? Regular expression. So email related regular expression, you will keep it over here, something, then PAN card related something, right? So whatever the data you normally need, which you can use in service, component, HTML, even pipe, right? So instead of hard coding that, it should come from your constant file. Clear? So like this, when our project grows, one by again, I forgot like two things I forgot. In core, we will have our interceptor. Sorry. Interceptor, because interceptors are also like uh, token interceptor, error interceptor. Let's say you have mock interceptor. So many interceptor we create. So interceptor folder, then guard, right? We create multiple guard, can activate, can deactivate, multiple types of guard we create. Then we have resolver. Okay. I don't know like who knows resolver, right? Again in resolver, you will create your resolvers. So these are the things you can have in your core folder. Okay. Now in employee service, in master service, everywhere we inject our HTTP client. Instead of doing that, you can create a common service, which will have your HTTP client object there, and it will have just four methods: get, post, put, delete. And everywhere you, instead of making the HTTP client, you will inject that service that we call it a generic service where we keep our API call function, right? So these are the helper I forgot. Now in helper, let's say common dot helper.ts. Okay. So now helper file is just a normal TypeScript file, but here we will have our actual pure function. Okay. The functions which we might use in where we don't use any global, right? The definition of pure function, like it doesn't depend on any output state, outer state or global state, right? Whatever the parameter you pass, it will have something and it will return the result. So let's say export const gets get by value or something is there. Okay. So let's say you have something logic over here, something, let's say currently I'm just returning some value 3.14 like that. Functions which are not connected with any particular service, which doesn't use any your global state. It is just a function which is meant to perform something and it should return some value. So those function, instead of creating it in your service or instead of keeping it in your component, you can keep those function in your helper file also. These are normal, what in JavaScript, what we call it is module. Just create a extra file where you declare all your function, export it, and wherever you need it, you use it. Let's say in employee service, you need the pi value. Okay. Let's say, okay, constant value is equal to, now we have to import that. So our function name is get pi value. Here also. Okay. So directly you can use it, but we need to import it. Okay. So kind of function which has no any particular relating. It is independent function. Whatever the parameter you pass, based on that, it do some operation and it will return the value. Those are your pure function, which doesn't use any global state. So those kind of function you can keep it in your helper file. It can have parameter, either you create your arrow function or normal function, anything. Okay. Then enum, let's say employee status dot ts. So here export enum status. Let's say active. We can store value also in enum. Deactive means employee code can have at least three values, 0, 1, 2, 3. So based on that, you keep it over here like that. And wherever you need to provide, let's say deactive status. So you will use status dot deactive. Then it will goes one value over there. Pending 2. Okay. Consider you are creating a new employee, and while creating new employee in your employee object, you need to pass default pending your pending status, and pending code is 2. So instead of hard coding that 2 over there, you create a enum of it. So then you use status dot, means let's say employee employee status dot pending. So then 2 value you will get. This is your enum. Again, not in every project you will use it, but you need proper scenarios like that, then you use this also. Okay. So this is overall structure normally we follow. Again, I didn't explain everything, but you got the idea. The major things I have already explained. Again, interceptor you will create, class you will create, right? Resolver you will create, and respective component. Okay, let me pause the recording, then we can go for questions.